Hello, my name is Dr. Megan Hanna and welcome. I want to start today's video with a confession. Some of what I was taught in my college classes, I don't actually remember. And at least one of my classes, I only clearly remember one thing. And that, oddly enough, is the lesson we're going to explore in this video. Many years ago, I took an economics course, and honestly, I couldn't provide detailed information about that course if you offered me $1,000,000. I don't remember the textbook. I don't remember the specific assignments. I couldn't tell you what was on the final exam, but I do remember one thing. My professor would pause, look out at the class, and say these 5 words: "Let me contend to you." I started counting them in my notes. Probably not the best use of my note-taking time, but by the end of the semester, I had a surprising number. All these years later, that's what I remember. Not a theory, not a graph, not a formula, a phrase. Over the years, I've realized something important about presentations. People don't remember everything. They just don't. They don't remember every slide, every statistic, every example, every point you make. Most of the time, they remember pieces: a story, a phrase, a visual, a moment you shared. Sometimes they remember only one thing, which raises the point we're going to spend the rest of this video exploring. When most people sit down to create a presentation, they go straight to slides. What template? What colors? Should I add animations? What images should I include? Which tool should I use? None of those are bad questions. They're just not the first ones you should ask. The first question should be, what am I trying to communicate? Because presentations aren't really about the slides or the visuals. They're about the ideas. The focus of presentations should be about helping people understand, learn, decide, or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. The slides and visuals are just tools. I've seen many presenters spend more time worrying about how a presentation looks than what it actually says. A beautiful presentation with no message is still an ineffective presentation. Before we worry about the design, we need to know the destination. One of the biggest mistakes presenters make is assuming that more information equals a better presentation. I get it. I've done it. You spend hours researching. You find articles, examples, statistics. You learn far more than you could ever fit into a 10-minute talk. Then something interesting happens. Because all of it feels important, you start trying to include all of it. And the presentation becomes a collection of information rather than a focused message. Here's the reality. Your audience is busy. They're listening, but they're also processing. They're thinking about work, home, what's happening later. That's normal. So when you give them 10 different takeaways, you shouldn't be surprised when they leave remembering none of them particularly well. This is where the idea of a through line comes in. A through line is the central message that connects every part of a presentation. Think of it as the thread that ties everything together, or if you prefer, think of it as the answer to a simple question. If my audience remembers only one thing, what do I want it to be? That's your through line. Once you've identified your through line, every decision becomes easier. Every story should support it. Every example should support it. Every visual, statistic, recommendation should support it. The through line becomes a filter. Whenever you're deciding whether something belongs in your presentation, ask yourself, does this help reinforce my central message? If yes, it probably belongs. If no, it might be interesting, but it doesn't necessarily belong here. One of the hardest skills presenters develop is learning what to leave out. A strong through line helps solve that problem. Let's look at an example. Imagine you're creating a presentation about remote work. You include the history, definitions, employee opinions, technology challenges, productivity stats, management concerns, and some recommendations. None of those are bad. Many of them are interesting. Some of them are probably helpful. But based upon what we've seen here, what is the audience supposed to remember? What are you trying to convince them of? If I left the room, what would I tell someone the presentation was actually about? It's hard to answer with the information we've been given. The presentation certainly has information, but no clear direction. Information matters, but information alone doesn't create clarity. Now imagine the same topic, but this time we begin with a through line. Flexible work arrangements improve employee retention. Now everything changes. The story we choose supports retention. The statistics we use support retention. The examples we provide support retention. The recommendations we make support retention. The audience knows exactly what matters: employee retention. The presentation becomes easier to build because you're no longer trying to include everything. Easier to understand because the audience knows exactly what they're looking for. And easier to remember. Something else to consider is that people don't always make decisions purely on logic, and they don't always make decisions purely on emotion. Sometimes it's a combination of both. Let's go back to our remote work example. Imagine I start with a story. An employee loves her work, contributes to her team, and is respected by her coworkers. But she's struggling to balance her job with caring for a family member. Eventually, she starts looking elsewhere. Now we're talking about a person, not a policy, a person. Then I introduce the data, the cost of turnover, the expense of recruiting, hiring, onboarding, training a replacement, the evidence that flexible work arrangements correlate with higher retention. Now we've added the logic. The story creates emotional connection. The data creates credibility. Together, they're far more persuasive than either would be alone. And notice, they serve the same purpose. They both reinforce the same message. That's the through line at work. This brings us back to design. Presenters often ask me, should I use animations, add transitions, include a chart? How about an image? And my answer is almost always the same. Maybe, because the better question is, how does this support the message? A chart isn't valuable because it looks professional. It's valuable if it helps the audience understand something important. An image isn't valuable because it fills space. It's valuable if it reinforces your idea. An animation isn't valuable because it's interesting. It's valuable if it makes your presentation easier to digest. Every element of a presentation should earn its place. Your slides aren't there to impress. They're there to help the audience understand and remember the message. This connects directly to a topic every presenter has to think about: audience analysis. Imagine presenting the same core message to 3 different audiences: executives, employees, and customers. The through line might stay exactly the same, but the presentation itself would likely look very different. Executives want high-level data and strategic implications. Employees want practical examples and implementation details. Customers care most about how the decision affects them. The message stays consistent. It's the delivery that's adapted. That's why audience analysis matters. Effective presenters don't just know what they want to say, they understand who they're speaking to and adjust accordingly. Let's finish where we started. I still remember that economics professor, not because I remember every lecture, not because I remember every concept, and certainly not because of the tally marks in my notebook. I remember one phrase. For better or worse, that's what stayed. And in the words of my economics professor, let me contend to you, that's commonly what happens in presentations. People remember something. The question is whether you're intentional about what that something is. So before your next presentation, before the next slide, before the next deck, pause and ask yourself, if my audience remembers only one thing, what do I want it to be? Once you've answered that, let it guide everything else, your stories, your examples, your evidence, your visuals, your design, your call to action. Great presentations aren't remembered because they contain the most information. They're remembered because they communicate one important idea clearly, consistently, memorably. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you walk away from this with anything, I hope it's the through line we keep returning to. If your audience remembers only one thing about your presentation, make it the right thing. See you next time. Bye.